Am I the a-hole for stop supporting my wife's family after my success since they once talked down about me? My early 30s, my wife mid-20s grew up in a fairly poor environment. Her grandpa had money, but her mom didn't and her sister doesn't. My wife has an incredibly strong work ethic. She's probably more so defined as a workaholic. When I first met her, I was trucking, making about $50,000 to $70,000 per year. Since then, I developed a niche for a specialty marketing field and became very good at it. All my friends encouraged me to go into business for myself with a marketing company. My wife was fully supportive of this, even after we discussed the financial difficulties we would have for the first year or so due to a limited budget. I made sure she knew that some months I may not get a check from the business. My salary is paid monthly. Her family, however, were not. They accused me of neglecting my family, being lazy, not wanting to work, etc. They would constantly be bringing up the fact that I didn't have a job because I was always home working remote. She would defend me, but they would ignore it and continue to call me lazy and a deadbeat for putting my daughter in daycare while I worked from home. I was still driving a truck part-time to have steady, reliable income, but it was only half of what I was making on a good week. In the last year, however, I have grown my income from my business beyond what I was making in trucking and have very little overhead. Since we cut costs back when I first started, we realized a lot of things we were paying for we could do without or found other alternatives, and we never really added those expenses back, so it's like we have significantly more money now. I still drive a semi occasionally for a friend who owns his truck, mainly to keep my CDL active and stay knowledgeable in the industry as a fallback. Her family has taken note, and they are constantly asking to go out to eat with us, hang out with us, etc., then get mad when I never pay for the meals, the outing, the vacation, etc., aside from my part of the tab, obviously. Looking back, I understand why they never had money. They were living well beyond their means, but if it makes them happy, then it is what it is. I let my wife do whatever she wants with her money, which sometimes includes buying stuff for her family, which I support her doing with her money if that's how she wants to spend it, but I make sure that she knows I don't want a dime of my money going to her family, since they were very unsupportive of what made us our money and would go as far as to talk down about me for doing what led to our money. Am I the a-hole for not wanting to support her family?
Here are the top comments, plus Opie's reply.
You are not obligated to play nice just because they want your money. I would, however, play nice if I wanted my partner to be happy. You can be polite without giving them anything, especially if they haven't apologized. I'm going with not the a-hole.
OP replied,
My wife is definitely happy. She is content with our arrangement and has never complained about it, but recently her family has been putting pressure on her to make me loosen up and be part of the family more.
I'm curious as to what your wife says when you say you don't want a dime going to her family. That will tell you everything you need to know. Also, not the a-hole.
OP replied,
She's fine with it. Occasionally, if I know there is something she really wants to get for her family, I'll compromise and pick up a bill or two on her side that she normally pays so she has some extra money to spend on them.
Am I the a-hole for not playing board games with my boyfriend and his friends on my birthday? I 29F had my birthday over the weekend, and to celebrate my mom booked an Airbnb in the city about 35 to 40 minutes away from where we live. For me, my partner 27M, and my dog to get away for a bit and just have a nice time. My partner's friend happened to live in this city too, so he asked if we could stop by and see him. I didn't really want to, but they told us to bring my dog along too, which I love because I hate going anywhere without him. Once we got to our partner's friend, I immediately had to lock my dog in their unfinished basement because he had cats and didn't tell us. I hated that. Bonus, it was down a flight of stairs and my dog has a front amp tripod, so it wasn't easy getting him down and back up. I would have never brought him if I had known he couldn't just be around with us. We sat around and talked for a bit, and then someone suggested board games. I love a good board game, but the ones they wanted to play aren't quick ones, and I really didn't want to be there that long, but I wanted my boyfriend to enjoy time with his friend, so I told them they could, and I was just going to sit by them and play my Switch because a game I was excited about had just come out and I had received it as an early present. We were there for probably close to 4 or 5 hours, way longer than I ever wanted to be. I was a little upset, but I didn't say anything. After we left, my boyfriend started telling me how rude everyone thought I was because I didn't sit down to fully join them and that I look like an a-hole. I was there in the room with them and engaged enough in conversation. I just wasn't playing the board game. I did my best considering we were there in the city for my birthday and I didn't even really want to stop to see his friend in the first place. I had friends in the city too I would have rather spent time doing celebration things with. This led to a big fight and him telling me his friends never liked me. I told my boyfriend I didn't think I did anything wrong, but he just kept saying I embarrassed him. I reminded him that we wouldn't have even been there if it weren't for him wanting to see his friend, and he said that wasn't the point. I ended up just shutting down because I was exhausted from the whole day. It sucked feeling like I had to defend myself on my own birthday. So am I the a-hole here? Should I have just played the stupid game?
Here are the top comments.
It wasn't great that you spend hours on your phone instead of playing with the group, but overall, your boyfriend is selfish and you are a doormat. This was a trip to celebrate your birthday. You could and should have stood up for what you wanted to do. You should have said no to stopping by to visit his friends. You shouldn't have stayed once you realized your dog wasn't going to be accommodated. Not the a-hole.
Everyone sucks here. You need to speak up for yourself. As soon as you saw the dog would be isolated and have a hard time getting downstairs, that was your cue to leave. Why didn't you say no to a board game as you already had plans? You agreed to stay and then didn't play. That is rude. Your BF also sucks as this was about your birthday, not seeing his friend.
Am I the a-hole for telling teenage boys to freaking stop? I 22 went on a trip to a theme park with my church's youth group yesterday. I'm one of the chaperones, and the kids are mostly teenagers around 13 to 16 years old. For the most part, they're good kids, but they can be a bit rowdy, especially when they're in a big group. While we myself and 5 or 6 boys were waiting in line for one of the rides, there was a woman standing in front of us who looked to be around my age, early 20s. She was wearing a tank top and shorts, not even booty shorts mid-thigh length, nothing outrageous, just typical summer clothes you would see in a mall clothing store. However, some of the boys in our group decided that she wasn't dressed modestly enough. Women in our church typically wear ankle-length skirts and sleeves to the elbow. They started clapping loudly in her ears, making comments about how she should cover up, and even going as far as lightly touching her arm and shoulder to get her attention. One even grabbed her hips. She was visibly uncomfortable but seemed too shocked or scared to say anything. I watched this go on for about a minute, expecting them to stop on their own, but they didn't. It was getting worse, and I felt awful for not stepping in sooner. Finally, I snapped and told them to freaking stop her. I didn't yell, but I was firm and clear. They immediately looked shocked and embarrassed, and thankfully, they did stop. Later, one of the other chaperones pulled me aside and told me I shouldn't have used that language in front of the kids, saying it was inappropriate and not setting a good example. He said I should have found a gentler way to correct them and that I overreacted. He also reminded me that using swear words is sinful. I don't usually use language like that, especially around kids, but in the moment, I was more concerned with getting them to stop this woman. Now I'm second-guessing myself. Maybe I could have handled it better, but I also feel like what they were doing was way out of line and needed to be shut down immediately. Am I the a-hole for cursing at them?
Here are the top comments.
You didn't go far enough. Shame on those little a-holes. I'd have gathered everyone and left the park and explained that since they couldn't exhibit the most basic level of respect, they didn't deserve a fun day. And F that other chaperone. Those kids needed a verbal slap in the face. It was totally appropriate. He wanted you to gently correct literal verbal and physical harassment. Oh, hell to the freak no. Sinful? Saying F word is more sinful than actual of a woman? Do not second guess yourself except for the ridiculously out-of-date church you belong to. Women have to cover to be modest around men, otherwise they'll be asked and assaulted. Join the 21st century, dude.
One even grabbed her hips. That's when you slapped the crap out of that kid.
In most circles, unwanted contact of that nature is called The lady should have called the cops, not the a-hole. Me? I would have went off on those kids. I would have said more than the F word. The a-hole is that chaperone not policing those kids. Was there any apology from the group to that women?
You're the a-hole for standing for a minute watching the group of boys a woman, and for underreacting.